Hey everyone, so today I'm excited to be able to share with you my M1 Finance portfolio. I'll show you what I've invested in getting started on the platform, as well as the pros and cons of utilizing the application. Now I'm going to show you through the web browser, but you can do pretty much all of this same stuff on your phone if you want to get started. And speaking of getting started, I will actually have a link in the show notes down below that you can click on to go ahead and download the app directly onto your phone. And before we hop onto the computer, if by chance this is maybe your first video with us, my name's Dennis, and here on the channel, I love talking about ways to build wealth and become more financially free. If that is something you're interested in, make sure you have that subscribe button hit down below, as well as click on that bell notification so that way you can get updates when new videos come up. So here on the dashboard of M1 Finance, you can see that we actually have more than $100 invested. And that's partially because when you invest, you want to be adding money over time. So of course we started off with 100. The funds that we actually have started out with are still the same ones that we have today, and we continue to grow those accounts. Now, my face is kind of blocking a little bit of the screen on here, so I'm gonna remove myself for a second and zoom in just a little bit, so that way we can actually see a little bit more. I'm gonna bring out my marker so we can kind of showcase some stuff. So the things that I personally have invested in with M1 Finance are right down here, as you can see. And we have with Vanguard right here, it is the share VOO. That one is actually the first fund. The next one is Tesla, and then the third one is Microsoft. And I'll get into a little bit about why I have those, but they are really just my own preferences. And one thing to really consider when it comes to investing is you want to make sure you're choosing things based off of your risk tolerance and just things that are going on in your life and not what anybody else has invested in. Because, for example, Tesla might be a little bit too much of a risk for most people, but I'm a big fan of them, so I have that. And then VOO with Vanguard is one that I prefer, but it might not be what you prefer. So make sure you always do extended research when it comes to what you want to invest in. Now with M1 Finance, you also are gonna see this pie chart right over here. And that is the chart that will actually break down what you're invested in into an overall visual, which I think is really cool because it helps out and gives you a better idea. So for example, you can actually hover over here and you can see that the vast majority of my investment here on M1 is with Vanguard S&P 500. And then if you hover over to the other ones, it kind of highlights it and also kind of just shows you which fund it is and how much you have currently in there. Now, one of the big pros when it comes to M1 Finance is actually the fractional sharing. Now, fractional sharing is a really cool concept that allows you to buy shares of a company, even if you don't have enough money to buy a full share. And I'll show you what that means here in just 1 second. So if we go into Vanguard's account right here, and go ahead and load that up. So in order to actually have a full share of Vanguard S&P 500, you need to be able to put down $267.51. But as you can see, we currently only have $145.38. So we don't actually have a full share of the Vanguard S&P 500. So with a lot of other companies, you are actually going to have to get a full-on share of that company, which means you have to put in that full $267.51. But because of how M1 Finance works and the fractional sharing, you do not have to put in that full total. So with this, you can see here my position with, actually, let me put this all up. With my position on this fund, for example, I actually have about 0.54347 shares of Vanguard 500, how much it actually cost me, and then the average share price, which depending on when you buy it, the average will go up or down. But I own half of a share because I'm able to put it in smaller increments because of the fractional sharing, which is a really nice feature if you are just getting started and you want to put money into funds that are much more costly. Same thing with Apple or Amazon or any other type of ETF or other types of funds that you want to invest in. You can do fractional sharing. And that's probably one of my favorite things about M1 Finance, over a ton of other different applications when it comes to investing. So one of the cons when it comes to M1 Finance, in my personal opinion, is the detailed information. They don't have a ton of details. If you actually click on details, it'll show you right over here. You can look at the performance over the last day, 5 days, month, 6 months, year, 3 years, and even 5 years. So you can see how all that works out. But overall, the details on this website versus other websites is a little bit lacking in my opinion, but it still gives you a great synopsis of what the fund is all about. Now, the Vanguard S&P 500 is an ETF, so it has a whole bunch of companies all into one. As you can see here, actually, it has it right here that there's over 515 different funds in this actual ETF. So if you wanted to, you can click on the view prospects over here, and it does go into some detailed information, but it is very complex. I'll actually just show you really quick what it looks like, and it makes it very difficult to want to read and go through, where other companies make it a lot easier to go through and read in more simpler formats. So M1 doesn't allow that as easily. But it does, of course, show you like the expense ratio, which is very important to know, the dividend yield if you wanted to know that, and then the actual cap on the market. So one of the other pros when it comes to the actual M1 Finance is that they actually do rebalancing for you. And this is a really cool feature, and I'll show you here in just a moment. So what happens with rebalancing is a lot of times you might want to be invested in a certain amount with each company or each fund. And with M1 Finance, they actually do this very simply for you. Now, this can actually be a con as well, because if you keep doing a lot of rebalancing, that can also bring up some tax implications. So just keep that in mind. So right here, we're gonna actually have an actual and a target. So what it means right here is the targets that I personally want for my funds are 90%, 5%, and 5% for each given fund. And so what that allows M1 Finance to do is anytime I deposit money, it will automatically make sure that each one gets the appropriate amount based off the percentage that I prefer. And with the auto rebalance, and what that does is if a certain fund starts growing immensely over other funds, it will readjust everything to get as close as possible to my balances. So as you can see here, the actual balance for the Vanguard fund is 89.9, the Tesla one is 5.1, and then the Microsoft one is 4.9%. So very close to what I would prefer. And so anytime dividends are paid out or anytime I invest more, those will get balanced out properly so I can keep at that. Because last thing I want to do is be over invested in one share of a company or one fund that I didn't want to be overly funded in, and underfunded in different categories that I actually wanted to have money in. So those are kind of like pro and con, just depending on the person, because again, there's some tax implications with rebalancing all the time on that front. So another great thing for M1 Finance is how easy it is to add additional accounts. Now for us right here, you can actually see at the top, you can actually add retirement accounts, joint accounts, other brokerage accounts if you wanted to, so that way you can have your personal investing as well as your retirement. You can even do rollovers if you are with a company and you left them, or if you have your funds with a different company but prefer M1 Finance. So it's very nice and easy to be able to add. You just click on add account, and then it'll give you all the different options right over here, so you can choose what you prefer to have your account opened with. So it's very nice and very easy. I only have my one main account, but I have heard from friends who use this app as well that it's super simple and easy to just quickly add another account. So we're gonna go ahead and close this off. One of the downsides when it comes to M1 Finance is the dividend reinvestment. It's really nice if dividends can be reinvested automatically, but they have a threshold of having $10 or more into your account to be able to reinvest. So I'll show you exactly what I mean. So if we go under the activities tab and we click on this recent activity here, we can actually go to where our dividends are. So we have our dividend right here with Vanguard at 64 cents. So that amount stayed in our account until we had a little over $10 to be able to have all that money reinvested into our actual pie. Now, the overall thing about when it comes to dividends is that once you get to a point where you start getting paid over $10, that yes, that money will be reinvested, but it will be reinvested throughout the whole pie and not just the fund that paid out. Because ideally, if you wanted to, with like VOO with Vanguard, it'd be nice if all of that 64 cents or whatever dividend payout you get goes right back into the account. But as you can see here, the trade shows you actually how it broke down that $10.64. A majority of it did go to Vanguard, a little bit to Tesla, and then a little bit to Microsoft. So that is the nice thing, again, as we talked about with fractional sharing, is that you can buy shares of companies for really small amounts. M1 Finance does this very well, where other companies like Robinhood do pay you out a dividend without it being reinvested, but you have to pay that full amount per share. So one of the other cons when it comes to M1 Finance is actually the fact that they don't have mutual funds. And of course that can always change, but as of right now, mutual funds are not available on M1 Finance. Although ETFs, which are fairly similar, are available. As you can see, I have VOO through Vanguard, which is an ETF. And if you go into the research section, you can actually check out different types of funds that they do have available for you to be able to buy into. Now, this list, as I mentioned earlier, it's not as detailed as some other apps or even other brokerage accounts. So I generally do my research on other platforms and then utilize that information to buy into whatever funds I want here on M1 Finance. So I would also say that there is a little bit of a con when it comes to the learning curve with M1 Finance, but that generally goes along with any type of investing platform. I think there's always going to be a learning curve in general because you're always finding something new and trying to understand something you didn't before. But as a pro, I would say that this is actually really great for beginners. I think it's somewhat simple to handle. I think it's really easy to just be able to do fractional sharing. And then I think that the ability to utilize this all on your app through your phone is also a very simple way to really get into investing. Because I think for a majority of people, investing is maybe something where you are just wanting to do it here and there and you don't want to put it so much time into it. So having the ability to do it through your app makes things a lot easier. And once everything is set up, all you do is just have everything either auto transferred in if you wanted to, or you can just send in money as you please, and then it does all the extra work for you. So another really great pro when it comes to investing with M1 Finance is that they have free trading. So being able to buy and sell trades is completely free. On other platforms, you have to pay a commission for those, but on M1 Finance, you don't. Now, that's a really great thing when you want to buy into different types of funds. So you can have a great collection of different companies or ETFs if you wanted to, and you don't have to worry about paying a commission. So my only caution with the free trading is it would be something where you don't want to feel like you can do day trading unless you have the experience to do so. And even then, I think it could be somewhat risky. I'm personally of the mindset of doing things on a long-term basis, but of course that's just my preference when it comes to investing. So the fact that I can have a piece of Tesla here because I like Tesla personally and have a little bit of a share from them is a really cool feature that I don't have to pay the commission. I don't have to pay the commission fee, or I don't actually have to pay the full share of the company, and I can own a very, very, very small portion of Tesla. And then one big thing to also keep in mind is that they are SPIC insured. And pretty much what that means is you are insured up to, I think it's $500,000 through your investments if something were to happen. And that is very important to note for any type of investing platform or brokerage company that you personally want to use. Very similar to like the FDIC when it comes to your banking accounts for your checking and your savings. So here on the actual dashboard as well, there are some really cool things to kind of look at when you are just browsing through your actual portfolio. So you could see the value of your actual starting point back in January. You could see your actual amount that you put in and then the actual market gains. And then on the gains category, you can actually see how much you earned from dividends versus how much was that actual from the market gains. And then your total return so far, so you can see how you're doing. And then of course the chart right here, so you can see the growth over time. And just like most kind of investments, you do have, small up and downs every single day, but as long as that trend is moving upwards, you're always doing well. So another thing here on the dashboard that you can see is, of course, you can do the buy and sell directly. You can do a rebalancing if you wanted to personally yourself, but as I mentioned, they do it for you as well. And you can even do editing if needed. And then the nice thing is you can even share this pie with other people. So if you want to share this with a friend or a family member, you guys can actually check that out. Pretty cool feature. If you go into the buy and sell, just so you can see what this looks like, it's going to have it right here, your current value, how much you want to put in, and then you can just hit continue. And then same thing with the selling. Of course, it gives you the warnings in case you have like automatic investing set up. And then we can go into the edit here, and you can actually even edit how much you have in each of your funds. So right now I have, like I mentioned earlier, 90% in Vanguard, 5% in Microsoft and Tesla. And that of course goes out 100%, but I can actually bump either some of these higher if I wanted to, lower one of these obviously to make it 100%. And you can see how the chart itself moves. So that way, eventually what it's going to do is it's going to start moving that money around, or if I'm investing money right away, most of that money will start going into the Tesla fund. So that way it gets closer to that 18%. And of course you can add more funds if you wanted to, just by hitting the add button. It'll take you into the overall search category here that you can either directly click on if you wanted to, or you can search by different types of categories, whether it's by the PE ratio, dividend yield, market, all these different pieces of information. And if you don't know what those things mean, don't worry, don't let them discourage you, because you learn them over time and you get better at things. One of my biggest things when it comes to investing is to just get started, even with a very small amount, because that way you can learn and practice these things on your own terms. It's one thing to watch these videos, read about investing, but it's a whole nother thing when you actually start doing the investments yourself. So those were the stocks that we were looking at, and then we can hop over to the funds. And the funds are usually like ETFs that you can invest in that have kind of like a group of stocks put together. And then of course you have your pie personally, and then you can even look at expert pies. So if you're not very good at figuring out what you want to be invested in, you can kind of come over here and view the different types of pies. So you can see what people are, looking at and what they have invested in. You can even see what type of pies are for which type of people. So for example, the income earners right over here, it says, that's a terrible box. It says income earners choose a portfolio focused on dividends and income returns. It says these pies are ideal for those who are looking for an alternative to a low yield savings account, prefer income returns over long-term growth, and would like a less volatile and more conservative investment approach. So if that's like, hey, that sounds like me, maybe that's what I want, you can click on view pies, and then it gives you a couple different options right over here. And then you can click even further down, and then it shows you the different types of companies that they are invested with. So that way you can have a pie that potentially works better for you if you're not as familiar on what to go with. So that's a really cool feature and a really great pro when it comes to M1 Finance, because it does really kind of guide your hand just a little bit as your first time going through this. And then another thing I wanted to show as well is of course the funding area. So you can of course add your bank account on there, you can change it, you can deposit or withdraw, just keep in mind with taxes. And then the other thing right here, you can do automatic investments. As you can see right now, I don't actually have, let me switch screens here. I don't actually have anything set up automatically, but what you can do is actually set it up so you can have it pulled maybe every paycheck, every other paycheck, once a month, whatever format works best for you. But it is a good idea if you're not in the habit of transferring money for yourself to actually have it done automatically for you, so that way you don't worry. But the great thing is, if you start off with smaller amounts, 10 bucks every paycheck, then move it up to 15, maybe $20. Those small amounts do really start adding up. And as you see your account grow, it does actually encourage you to want to invest more, especially when you see the impact it can have over time. So overall, I really like M1 Finance. I think it's a really easy and simple platform to use. Of course, there's always that little learning curve with any products you might start using, but I think for getting started with investing, they make it a lot easier, and I absolutely love the fractional sharing. As I mentioned earlier, I think it's such a great feature where you can buy smaller portions of a company or even a fund, so that way you can actually get started. Putting $100 down, I wouldn't have been able to buy actually any of the 3 funds I currently own, just because of the massive amount of cost it takes to buy just one share. So having the ability to do the fractional sharing got me started with just $100. And if you're actually going to be getting started with M1 Finance, I'd actually like to know, which fund would you actually get started with? Let me know in the comments down below. Be really interested to hear, even if you've had other brokerage accounts or if this is maybe your first time. Let me know. I'd be really interested to hear what you are investing in. So I hope you got some great insight here today on M1 Finance. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button down below, and then you can keep watching this channel by clicking on this video right over here.